Welcome to A Canadian Investing in the U.S., a podcast and YouTube channel focused on Canadians buying real estate with host Glenn Sutherland.
Welcome to another episode of A Canadian Investing in the U.S. This week, my guest is Tim Tsai. Tim, I see lots of your stuff on Facebook. I feel like I kind of know you, but I haven't ever actually met you in person. Let's start by telling me a bit about your story. Tell me a bit about you.
Yeah, you know what? Likewise, that's kind of how it works these days, right? Yeah. I mean, especially since COVID, I feel like I've added like 5 extra new friends just on Facebook, even though I haven't met them in person yet. Yeah. So likewise, nice to meet you. Yeah. And thanks for having me on. And I know that you've actually spoken to quite a lot of people that are really in the common circle already that I also know. And they've actually talked about you quite a bit and all very highly regarded. So it's good. And one of them told me that they've actually done deals with you. And so, you know what? This is a very small circle, as you know. And if they done deals with you, then I know the trust factor is there. So, and that's important to me.
Yeah, I know exactly which one you're talking about, and that's the way I do. Like when I borrow money for private lending, is
exactly.
I didn't have any issues with that one. But if you ever have issues with private money, my rule is always like never tell the person who's lent you the money that you're having problems, and find a way to pay them no matter what. Never make any excuses. Don't make your problems their problems because they won't want to be. You just make it seamless. You find the money. I didn't have that. Everything went perfectly to plan with the one we did. But if you do have problems, just pay them every time. And that's how you will build your reputation if you do what you say you're going to do. Yeah, exactly.
And that's what we always say, right? People will do business with people that they know, like, and trust. And trust is built on one deal at a time, right? And so it sounds like you've done that really well.
Yeah. So we'll go back to it. Tell us about you. Let's hear your story. I know you've done a lot of stuff, so we're not going to go into each deal or anything like that.
No, yeah. Well, you know what's really funny is that, I mean, this year I keep telling people that I'm kind of celebrating my 10th anniversary, so a decade into this industry now, which is real estate investing. And I actually really started simply because I lost all of my savings about 10-ish years ago. Oh. And yeah, well, I mean, you and I both know this is real estate. If you know what you're doing, you can make a lot of money. If you don't know what you're doing, you can lose a lot of money pretty fast too. So that's kind of what happened to me, because back in 2009 now, I know I don't look that old. I mean, yeah, anyway. I'm in my late 30s. So this kind of happened in my late 20s. And it didn't really take a rocket scientist to really learn that, hey, you know what? My RSP was not going to get me the retirement lifestyle that I was looking for. Yep. And I was one of those really good Asian kids that worked really hard, made a lot of money, and I stashed a lot of money away. So between TFSAs, and they only just started in 2008 or 2009, right? TFSAs. Back then, yeah. And I don't even remember now. And I put away money for RSPs. I did stock option because I came from the corporate world. I did everything I can possibly do, including savings and paying down my mortgage as quickly as I possibly could. See, I sound like somebody who's not financially educated back then. And I totally was. And it's really funny because I don't know if you know this, every single day I do, between Monday and Friday, I do something called my daily dose with Tim. And this week, because somebody suggested that maybe I should share a little bit about the financial education journey that I've been on too. Yeah. And so today I kind of talked about that too. So, well, back in 2009 though, at that point, I had already been in corporate for about 3 years. And 3 years in, I was literally, most people say, hey, they work 40-hour jobs. I mean, congratulations. On paper, I had a 40-hour week job. However, really, the reality was 70, 80 hours. And that's just what you get, right? For climbing the corporate ladder as quickly as you possibly can. You always want to, reach that carrot that they were dangling in front of you. You want to climb a little faster, so you always go above and beyond. I remember the joke that we always had amongst all of us was championing something or championing a project means basically getting paid the same and working way more. That's it, right? Yeah. And so when the combination of all of that basically got me to ask one of my coworkers who was basically my mom's age, actually 30 years older than me. And so again, I looked at her and I'm like, well, you know what, we're at the same level and we probably get paid about the same amount of money. Why is your lifestyle so much better? Forgetting that she's 30 years older than me. She's got a bit more runway now to
Yeah.
build her wealth.
Yeah.
However, she basically just said, hey, you know what? We actually park our money in real estate. And to me, right there and then, I'm thinking, oh, jackpot, because I've been interested in real estate, just never really looked into it, to be really honest. I was an accidental or a natural landlord, as in I actually moved from Vancouver to Edmonton in 2009, and I left a condo behind that I was renting out at the time.
Yep.
Even though it was not cash flowing, most months, it was actually in the negatives. However, again, old mindset. It didn't matter. It's okay, especially in the Vancouver market. Value is going to go up.
Yeah.
And in fact, it did go up. By the time I moved, it had already gone up $100,000, which is crazy.
Yeah.
And for a 20-something-year-old, that was like, yeah, okay, you know what? I'm just going to buy as many as I possibly can. And that is the one very thing that I speak against these days as well. Don't be a property collector for the sake of doing that. And so I got a referral from my coworker, and she said, hey, just talk to this guy. So the trust was already kind of there because, you know, I saw how successful she was, the lifestyle that she had, and, you know, I respect her. And so she goes, just talk to this guy. And honestly, though, that day when I go to that meeting with I think he was a developer or the salesperson really representing that project. Long story short, I already had my checkbook with me. Again, that's how old I am. I brought my checkbook with me. And literally at the end of a very amazing 45-minute presentation with all the glossy marketing materials that he laid down in front of me, I just go, yep, I'm in. And I write a check of every last penny that I saved up leading up to that point. And here you go. I was going to cash out my RSPs. I was going to cash out my savings, and just so that check would clear. Because he was promising 8%, 9% over 4 or 5 years. Right? And if you know the rule of 72, I'm thinking, my RSP's been doing 2%. This is going to give me 8 or 9, if not more. And this is hard asset. That's a no-brainer.
Yeah, yeah.
And the funny thing is, a few months later, and because this was 2009, so remember, 2008, global financial crisis. 2009 came around. I think I was probably the very last wave of whoever they could get money from, because about a month later, so at the turn of 2010, you know, I'm thinking, oh, you know what? I'm going to get my D certificate now. And I actually got something from a law firm. And I was so excited. I opened up that mail only to find out that, well, guess what? They actually took everybody's money and ran. The job site was already abandoned. And the letter was basically the lawyer saying, hey, you know what? A group of investors, they had already started a class act lawsuit. Do you want to join it? If you do, come to an info session. That's what that was about. Oh. And I'm just going, oh my God, like, what's happening here? I did not, that's how naive, really, I was. Like, I didn't think something like that could happen or would happen. Right? I'm sure you've heard of stories like that too, unfortunately.
Yeah, I have.
Yeah. And so, you know, and I think really the turning point of that was I did decide to go to the info session. I did not join the lawsuit. However, I'm so glad that I popped into that meeting, because the moment I walked into that room, I very quickly realized I was probably one of the youngest, if not the youngest person in that room. Because what I saw was people in their 50s, 60s, 70s, maybe even, and they had their entire life savings put towards the same project that my money was in that got taken away. And there were people that were basically just crying. They could not even comprehend or speak their minds or anything anymore. And it hurts. It hurts even just thinking about it every time. However, I'm glad that I witnessed that, because that is really, a lot of the times, it's my guiding light. Because, you know, there are times in this industry, things get tough. Like what you were saying, right? When you borrow money, don't make your problem their problem. You're still going to run into problems.
Yep.
However, when those moments happen now, I just remember people saying, that was my entire life's work. How am I going to put food on the table? How am I going to pay rent? How am I... Some of them were even saying that, you know what? I might as well just go and off myself, jump up a bridge or something. And it was truly heartbreaking to see.
So is that the start over? Is that where you, after that, is where you started over?
Yeah, and I think everything happens for a reason, because like I walked away from that really shook up and really numb at the same time. You know that feeling? I just like, okay, well, what now? right? And I'm like, okay, well, I'm still young, so I can still work my assets off and accumulate something and start over. What about those people? However, what if this happens to me again 20 years from now? And everything kind of happens for a reason. I really do believe that. And then a couple of weeks later, I was driving to a work appointment, and this little ad came on and said, hey, come to a real estate investing workshop. We're going to teach you how to do this professionally. So I went. And so I went to this first workshop, and I invested $50,000 of my money. I actually had to take out loans to get myself trained, because everything the trainer was saying just made a whole lot of sense, and including the one I just said. If you know what you're doing, you can make a lot of money. If you don't, you can lose a lot of money, which I did already at the tender age of 28. and just to have a taste of that, it was just not great at all. And so even though I had no savings left, I decided to go out and take loans so that I can pay for my education. And that's actually how I got started. And I think that's why I became super passionate about financial education as well. And 6 years ago, I started, being in that industry and started to travel around the globe to really educate people on financial education as well, mostly leveraging real estate. However, on our own, we've leveraged a lot of the same soft skills and business building mindsets to acquire other businesses too over the years.
I know in your past you've worked in doing some mobile home parks and some flips down in the States. Is that where you went right after the after restarting, or did you go into some Canadian stuff and back and forth? Like, how does the rest of the story go?
Yeah. So I think the B side, if you follow me, the cassette days, the B side of that story is that I actually the year after so 2010 was when I started getting educated. So started applying what I've learned. 2011, I had a third minor heart attack that hit.
Oh.
And so, nobody actually expected that, to be fair, because I had one at 18 and then 19. I had heart surgery when I was 20, and I had a 6-year follow-up schedule, and my cardiologist just cleared me, no problem. And at the age of 29, had a third minor heart attack, and that was my fault. Again, corporate lifestyle, I was climbing up the ladder pretty quickly, and I was managing 4 teams across 3 different time zones. And that's why 80-hour weeks, if not more, because I had to travel too. And just wasn't really taking care of myself. I mean, the money was okay. However, I wasn't taking care of myself. So that happened. And when that happened, it really taught me. A lot of people said, usually when I tell this story, a lot of people say, so 2 heart attacks didn't teach you anything. You have to have a third one. Yeah. And it's true. Because, in 2011, when it happened, it kind of catapulted me into a major, major depression at the same time. And so I was kind of battling both physically, mentally to get better. And at that point, though, a couple of months into it, all of a sudden it hit me that, hey, you know what? I actually invested in my financial education. If I'm not going to use it now, when am I ever going to use it? And that's really when I started to actively applying what I've learned. And so the silver lining about what happened there, though, is that I did not go into US right off the bat, even though I think for a lot of Canadians, that's sort of one of the aspirations always. 10 times the population, way more opportunities. You can still pick up properties for like pennies on the dollars, that sort of thing, right? In different markets that you go to. I did because I was recovering and building a portfolio at the same time. We actually started in our own backyard. These days, we don't do that anymore because we have a formula that we stick to. However, in the beginning, because we really could identify with the lease option strategy. So that was actually my baby strategy. And I've been teaching that through another organization for the last 6 years. And that's kind of how we got started and hammered out. I didn't think it was actually a lot because I just felt like I lived in a world of giants, of people that accumulate properties like nobody's business, like they're buying candies or something. And so our first year we did just about 12. I mean, depending on how you count your cutoff date. The way I count my cutoff date that year was our fiscal year. We did exactly 12, so a dozen lease options. And that's using lease options or rent to own as an exit strategy, primarily single family homes. So we were helping people get into homeownership because I was an immigrant myself. So in 2004, when I was looking to acquire my very first property, that condo that I mentioned in Vancouver, nobody would give me a mortgage unless, I had a co-signer. I think at the time it was 45% down. And I'm like, well, I just graduated university as an international student. Where am I going to find 45% down? Even though it was only a $260,000 condo back then.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah.
And so I think that strategy's always had a soft spot for me. And I understand that a lot of people, they didn't do it very well. So that was also a personal goal to just make it as perfect as possible. So first year we did a dozen. Second year we did 2 dozens. However, the cool thing about that was that basically 6 properties in, I was financially free. Because after my heart attack, I was lucky that I was able to be home for about almost a year. I was really recovering, doing everything I could. I wasn't really active just yet until the turn of 2012 at this point. And became super active on doing deals. And basically, July came around 2012 and I was about to go back to work. And so I hope nobody ever has to experience this, because if you do, that usually means that you were off on a fairly major illness so that you could qualify for long-term disability. However, when I was going back to work, they were offering, between the employers and the insurance companies, they were offering me something called a graduated return to work schedule. So funny enough, because that's what the government is saying now about COVID, when it all gets lifted, right? Instead of 40 hours a week, you're doing 8 hours first week, 15 hours second week, you gradually reintegrate yourself back into that environment. And 2 weeks into it, I got a call. Literally, you know what? I've never seen this happen to any of my friends leading up to that point, just in movies and TV shows. I got called in, and because it was satellite office here in Edmonton, then I got called into a meeting room with my director at the time at a hotel. They rented a room for the day. It was 1 table, 2 chairs, 1 on each side, with an envelope right in the middle. I was getting laid off that day. And, it probably helps to tell you that I worked for the Yellow Pages group. That's a joke. You don't have to cut that out. It's fine. And so it makes sense. Whenever I tell people who I worked for, they're like, well, that makes sense. They couldn't afford to keep you. And so that day happened, and I will always remember that. That was July 25th, 2012, because that was also the day after that happened. I went home. I actually wasn't freaking out. I had a feeling that it was going to be okay, because the moment I got home, back then, I was still running on an Excel spreadsheet to track all of our properties. And I added all the cash flows up, and I realized, hey, I'm actually financially free. So that was what's actually really cool about it. And so that's why lease option, not only do we get to help people to become homeowners and immigrants, really, that's my soft spot again. It got me to retire myself at 30. And as a result, I was able to, because as every deal came to a close, there was that lump sum profit too. And I was able to start doing small lending deals too. And in a way, that's kind of how I grew my portfolio. So the first couple of years, it was a lot of lending, and then it was rent-to-owns, and it was some flip projects here and there. Yep. And then the next step was, well, hey, you know what? Once you start to be active in an industry, people naturally kind of hear about you. They start to present opportunities with you. And that's when the U.S. deals came through. So we started teaming up, same strategy, just flips and some auction buying down in the Arizona markets. Yep. And we did some of that. And then the biggest one that we did, and it was actually done not through a cash buy, however, what we call a rolling option. Yep. So again, when people learn about lease options, you understand that really, when it comes to options, it's the sky's the limit. You can be as creative as you want to be. And we were really helping out a seller in need at the time. It was a 144 lot mobile home park, and spread into two different chunks of land, and right outside of Dallas, Fort Worth. Okay. And so we kind of got in, we started talking about it in end of 2013, officially got into it in 2014, and unfortunately had to let it go in 2017, because I did not realize how liberal, let's just put it that way, a lot of my money investors are. Yeah. And you know what? Blessing in disguise. Everything happens for a reason, like I said earlier. Because funny enough, those whoever bought that from us, they somehow decided not to run it anymore after a couple of years. So, yeah.
Maybe
however, we were lucky.
Who knows?
Yeah, I know. because I think maybe they're gearing up for bigger things. I didn't follow up, to be really honest. However, we bought it when the US Canadian was only 1 to 1.1. And when we sold it, and we bought it through rolling options, meaning we actually had very little money down, and whatever money we had to put down, it was all through private lending as well, through joint venture partnerships and partnership structures. And so really,
so
it was
maybe I'll just slow you down there for a second. Maybe we should define rolling options. How is, like, I know I do lease options, but what exactly is a rolling option?
So basically, rolling options, honestly though, if you've done a simple purchase, meaning if you've made an offer to buy something, every single offer to purchase contract typically already has a rolling option. Rolling option just means that you have different options coming due at different times. However, you stack them as a graduate schedule. And so in this particular case, because I can talk about this all day because it took us 3 months to get the paperwork done with the lawyers too.
Yeah, okay.
However, I'll give you the short and sweet version. How's that?
No, let's do it. I love it.
Yeah, so basically, like I said, 144 units and spread between 2 different chunks of lands. And on one chunk of them, it was actually split into 2 different lots as well. And so basically what we decided to do was that because the seller was in need to sell because he committed himself into another development project, so he needed some money out first, and at the same time he was also already looking to leave that market. So what we managed to negotiate with him was that, hey, you know what, so for the first chunk, I don't remember exactly how many units were in that chunk. However, the point is we negotiated that, hey, you know what, we're going to buy your entire 144 units with you over a 12 months time period. And so the first 4 months, we are going to acquire that first chunk first. And what we're going to do, because at the time, the reason why he also wanted to sell was because he didn't want to manage it anymore because it was actually not performing. However, it had all the potential in the world. And we knew that if we just come in and do what we knew what to do in terms of marketing and then finding better management companies and really cleaning up the tenancy a little bit and upgrade a few things, no different than a typical property, that process, we will make it perform pretty well. So what we decided to do was that we're going to acquire that first piece. We asked for 4 months. And in that 4 months, we decided to do all the things I just described with you so that it gets to a certain cash flow point so that we can actually leverage that to borrow money from our private investors right here in Canada and to bring the money down to the US. And so we actually only had to spend money on legal fees to do agreements with him. And the moment we could prove that we are able to turn that first chunk around and make a cash flow in 4 months, it was easy for us to raise funds now to go and acquire the second one. However, we locked that in. So no different than, every workshop that you ever go to that teaches you how to do real estate investing. Rule number 1 is always get it under contract. Right? Make an offer, get it under contract. And that's exactly what we did. It's just that we did not promise to buy everything in one go. We had different conditions with each chunk, let's say the 3 chunks. So the first chunk, no money down. Second chunk, we gave him what he needed to walk away so that he can go into this project as we started to make the business profitable again.
So I'm guessing this wasn't your first dive into the US.
No, that was not our first one. And because of the environment and network that we were in through the education that we got, we were able to get connected to a lot of good power team members as well as active investors selling in the US right off the bat. So
Yeah, and that's like the trick you're going to need, right? Like if you want to change management and find better management, you don't want to waste your time putting a bad one in and then another bad one until you find the right one. Skip some steps by with some networking, right?
Exactly. Yeah, so that's kind of what we did down there. And in 2017, I decided to go over to the UK as well and to start building portfolios. So the idea about the UK, though, really, it wasn't so much about the UK per se. It was the fact that we actually just wanted to continue to acquire properties and anywhere in the globe that would work. However, again, one of the biggest things is, again, I'm from Asia originally, and I was born and raised in Taiwan. Now, we all know how strong China's market has become and them as a force of a global economic leader moving forward as well. And so in the last 10 years, the Chinese markets have just boomed like crazy. And so obviously that was a market that I was looking into as well. However, again, this sort of presented another side of the challenge, because while we were looking at the Chinese market, while we were looking at some of the other markets like in New Zealand and Australia and the Philippines and Vietnam and even Italy as well as Spain, we looked at all of those because honestly, though, selfishly, we were looking at those places because we wanted to maybe start buying our own retirement residences or vacation homes too. And yeah, right. So in the meantime, rent it out, make money for you, and you have a vacation place everywhere in the world you want to go to. However, the biggest thing that we really learned though is that, you know, not necessarily every single country that you go to, when you bring the money in, you can actually take the money out when you want to. And that is actually what got us to really start studying sort of, okay, as Canadians, because you say you're Canadians investing in the US, as Canadians, when we bring our money abroad, cross the border, it's great because a lot of government, they love it. They love foreign investors because you're boosting their economy. You're helping them build their infrastructure, especially when it comes to real estate. However, when you need that money out, how easy is it for you to do that? And so that really launched this whole, like, I think it took us about 2-3 years just to do studies here and there while we continued to just add properties to our portfolio as well, right here in North America. And we landed in the UK because, 2016, obviously, we all know Brexit voting happened. And UK, at that point, the pound dropped by 45% overnight. And as Canadians, it's like money, right? Because again, it's one of the world's oldest, actually, I think it is the world's oldest recognized common international currency. And so there is something that I've learned over the years called the mean reversion when it comes to currencies as well. It basically means that at the end of the day, again, it doesn't matter what the exchange rate right now is fluctuating at, there is always a graph. Everything is cyclical, almost like real estate. Yeah, I don't think I'm going to be explaining mean reversion today. I mean, everybody can Google that a little bit. Specifically, though, about currency, okay? It basically just means that, yes, you know what, pound may have temporarily lost its value right now. However, even if you look at what it's trading at these days, it's already at 1.7, about 1.7. In 2016, when the voting first happened, I think it dipped as low as 1.56. That is ridiculous. And at its peak, pound against Canadian dollars was 2.2. And so I think from that point, that was very attractive for me because, again, we go into real estate obviously for cash flow, however, also for long-term wealth. And because of our experience in the US as well, like I said, when we first got into it, it was $1 US to 1.1. When we let it go, it was actually 1 to 1.35 already. And so, you know, we kind of learned from that experience that, hey, you know what if we can not just make a cash flow, not just make the equity gain and the pay down and the market lift. What if we can even have a little bit on top of that, which is the currency edge? Why not? So that's kind of what got me to go into it. Obviously, again, I was contracting myself out to another organization before, and I was traveling around the globe to teach people how to invest in that market too. And so I'm just a big fan of leading by example personally. I would never tell anybody to do what I've not done, nor am not willing to do, especially when it comes to investing. So,
if you don't mind me asking, what did you buy when you were over in Europe?
Yeah, so in the UK, this is what's actually really cool because, you know what, I actually didn't go to the UK until I decided to set up a business. The first trip that I took to the UK, to London, I went and set up my corporation there. And so it's really interesting that you don't have to personally be there to decide that you want to invest there, because that is one of the biggest lessons that I'm also sharing a lot with people these days, is that I think a lot of people, when it comes to real estate investing, they put more emphasis on real estate than investing. However, I mean, not everybody's a realtor in this industry. I mean, we call ourselves investors for a reason. Right?
Yeah.
Because we're learning about how money works at the end of the day. Like, that's why, again, financial education to me is the biggest piece of it all, because we're just leveraging real estate as our vehicle to create that cash flow, to generate that long-term wealth. So when I went over there, I realized, oh my God, people actually live very differently. Their lifestyle, right? And I didn't realize how packed it was, because coming from Asia, everything's like just packed.
Yes.
And then I came to North America. I've been here for 20 years now, and everything's wide open. Plus, I'm in Alberta now, so we got a lot of land.
Yeah.
And a lot of blue sky and sunny days, and so I forget what it's like. And so all of a sudden I get to the UK, it's like, yeah, you know what, everything, all the studying, all the research that I've done is true. 65 million people on that teeny tiny island, and most properties are old and run down and have mold issues. Surprise, right?
Yeah.
It's so great. And which I just realized that because one of the strategies that we learn is what they call HMO, houses of multiple occupancies. So we would just simply call it rooming houses, basically. And here, rooming houses really are not that popular unless, you know, you're a student still and you want to cut some costs, right?
Yeah.
Over there, super popular, super popular, and it's like a cash flowing machine.
Well,
if you're in the right market and you have the right product that you put out there as well. And so we usually say that, again, a regular HMO is about 5 bedrooms or bigger, and it's got usually 3 floors. And it caters to not just students, it also caters to what they call semi-professionals and professionals, because the train system, then they're actually expanding on their train systems as well. I don't know what COVID has done to it. I haven't done my research yet. However, they're always expanding on their transportation, because as we all know, when it comes to doing due diligence 101 on buying properties, it's location, location, location. However, the way we determine that location, especially over there, is how accessible the property is to major cities, or rather major employment centers. And so as long as that box is checked, you're pretty much good to go. So what that really means is that, you know, you actually have your traveling lawyers and doctors and nurses and students and contractors, right? And because unlike Canada, it takes 9 hours to fly from coast to coast. You can drive around that island in 9 hours, basically. And that's the difference, right? So again, when we have hired contractors here, most of them are local, or at the very most, they probably come from a different province. For example, right, BC was getting a lot of Alberta contractors because our economy wasn't doing so well, and vice versa when Alberta was booming. However, in that country, you can literally have one contracting crew move around the island for you, as long as you're buying properties across the country.
Huh.
Right? And so obviously not ideal. However, that's the point, is that that's the density that we're talking about. And this is what really opened up my eyes after the US, because you know what, 360 million people, and here 65, still significantly less. However, it's also a lot easier to get to. And funny enough, my very first property over there was just very simple. And we take the same approach every time we build a new portfolio in a new market, is that we always solidify our passive income first, and then we go and play and gamble a little bit. Because these days we actually do a lot of land developments, and some go really well and some go nowhere. However, again, when you get to that level, usually there's a lot of upfront costs that you have to incur, right? However, again, like I said, we just focus on passive with every new market that we go into. And in the UK, we actually started out with the Scottish market. We got into Glasgow, and then we were buying what they call buy-to-lets, which is our single-family home income properties, basically. So that was actually the added spice of it all, is you think you speak English, and turns out you don't. Because let is rent, right?
Oh.
Over there, like L-E-T, like let's go. Let means rent. So you buy to rent it out. Buy to let. And most people, you know, kind of like when we say RTO is rent to own, they do B, and then the number 2, and then L. That's a buy to let. So that's a small income property. There we go. And I was able to buy my very first buy-to-let for £35,000. Wow. And that turned out to be 70,000 Canadian, all in with fees. And then we had to do about $12,000 of renovation work. So let's just say after all is said and done, 85,000. Okay, yeah. And that was cash buy, actually, not leveraging yet. The rent on that was £375 a month. Wow. And that really opened up our eyes. And this is why these days when we teach, we always talk about the whole.
Because it's not, you're talking 85,000 Canadian, and then you talk about rent in pounds. Yeah. So if you're going to go, you got to compare apples to apples. So pounds to rent. So you said 750 pounds, and it was probably, what that work out to, like 45K, 45,000 pounds?
Yeah, around there.
So maybe less, because 15.
Around there.
Yeah, and I'm just doing some rough math in my head. Okay.
Yeah.
But people always like to go, well, that's not, that's just around the 1%. No, you're different currencies. Yeah.
Exactly. So yeah, I know, for some people, because we can also go to New Brunswick still and get better cash on cash. Yep. At the same time, our goal was to really expand our portfolio internationally and go into a market where if and when we do sell the property, or when we want to bring the cash flow back into Canada, there's no problems, right? The countries, they have treaties, they have taxation talks already, and it's all done. And so that's kind of how we landed in that market. And then we got into buying HMOs, and then we got into doing commercial conversions as well. And that's the funny thing. Over there is such a shortage on residential housing that we're buying old commercial property. So one of the biggest projects that we've done so far over there is to convert a place for worship, not a church per se, however, a place for worship, back into an 18-unit student rental by a university. And the demand is just kind of crazy. So it's a whole different world. Right, and so that's what we've done over there so far. And every property, obviously, distress being the very fundamental approach.
Okay, you just got me curious. I'm going to ask you a couple questions. So, you got a corporation over in Scotland.
In Great Britain.
Great Britain. That's what I was going to say. Like the corporation, is it like country specific, Great Britain specific, Euro specific? Like how? So it's down to Great Britain, so you get a corporation for that. And how is that corporation different than, say, a Canadian corporation? Or you're familiar with the Americans, too. Is it similar to an LLC, an LP, a C Corp, an S Corp, or a Canadian Corp?
Very similar to a Canadian Corp. And this is usually the conversation that I have with people, just because, we've looked at other places. However, personal experience-wise, we've done Canadian, US, and the UK as well. And this is what I tell people is that from a tax standpoint, Canada and the UK are very, very similar. From a closing and buying process perspective, Canada and the US are very similar. Because in the UK, until possession date, the seller and the buyer can both change their mind, even if the conditions are removed.
Oh.
Yeah. So that presented some challenges and getting some used to, as you can imagine.
That sounds like a nightmare if you were actually living there and you're like, oh, I sold my other house, I'm moving into this one. Oh, we changed our mind. What? Where am I going to live?
Yep. Hence HMOs, because a lot of the HMOs are also short-term rentals. There you go. See, you know what? You just gave me a light bulb moment.
How difficult was it to get a mortgage?
Well, you know what? Actually, not overly difficult, to be really honest. As long as you can, they will actually take your foreign income as proof as well. They have different programs. And so that's why, even from a lending perspective, it's not all that different. Obviously, like most lenders, they want to see a track record. So once we've actually established our corporations, most of the times they want to see at least 2 years of track record. And that's why in the beginning, we were buying smaller properties, all with cash. And then once we hit that 2-year mark, we started to remortgage everything and just scale up our portfolio that way. So a lot of people here, we just know it as the BRRRR process.
Yep.
However, for a decade now, we've always been talking about, hey, it's all about money in, money out, income for life, assets for free, right?
That just got my head spinning. I'm like, you know what? For what I thought, how I thought this conversation was going to go, we're like totally in something else.
Everywhere.
Yeah, I was like, oh, we're going to talk about flips and trailer parks, and we'll probably talk about a lot of Canadian real estate. I'm like, we're in the UK. Like, how do we get over there? No, but I love it. I'm like, because you get your mind running. You're like, okay, well, I could go into like Puerto Rico and all these other places that are basically a state, right? Because they're all affiliated. And then you're like, I don't have to learn new laws. And you go, well, I could go to some of these other countries, but then I have to learn new laws. And you're like, well, some of these, if you go Great Britain, it's very similar. You're like, that It does have an
Yeah.
appeal. Like, I understand Canadian, I understand American.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and that, you know what, you kind of made you made a really good point there, and you really hit the nail on the head there, is the fact that, you know, we all pretty much still speak the same language. Again, it was a bit of a challenge in the beginning.
Yeah.
Plus, English was not my first language to begin with. So, and so going over there, it's like, you know, they don't call lawyers lawyers; they call them solicitors, right? And like, appraisers are valuers, and general contractors are builders. So all these things, you know, like, we use the same words; they just kind of mean something different altogether at the same time, right?
Yeah.
And it's fun. However, the point is, though, this is what I keep telling people, is that when we decided to go down to the US, yes, you know, auction buying may be a little bit of that process we had to learn. However, at the end of the day, what we're doing is flip, buying distressed. When we're buying, you know, the mobile home park, doing rolling options, really it's the combination of lease options and knowing how to buy distressed. Once again, how to solve the seller's problems and knowing a little bit about the laws. When we went to the UK, same idea, right? Once you have some fundamental strategies and knowledge and experience done, all you're really learning are two things, in my opinion: building codes and regulations and tax laws.
I've been looking for an excuse to go to Scotland, and I'm like,
There we go. You should. You
Yeah.
should. It's still a good market.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
And again,
How
we're
long
all
ago
kinda,
was this
you
to
know,
get like a 35,000 pound property? How many
This
years ago
was-
we're talking about?
Yeah, so this is the beginning of 2017. These days, I mean, again, I still have a lot of wholesalers that I work with. By the way, wholesalers, they call them sourcing agents. So I'm still connected to quite a bit of sourcing agents, just because we're actively building that portfolio still. We just finished our entire first round of remortgaging at the beginning of the year, thank God, right before the lockdown happened. And so I was planning to go back there and to do some shopping. Right, property shopping.
Yeah.
And and
It's
these
gonna be
days
tough
it's
now.
all business trips, right? All business trips. Everything that I've experienced in life so far just really taught me that life is way too short to not pursue what you truly have fun with. So
People wanting to get a hold of you,
Appreciate it.
how do they track you down?
yeah, you know, very simple. They can find me on Facebook. I'm the only Tim Tsai out there. Actually, not, but that's my handle though that I created
Yeah.
with Facebook, because you get to name yourself. And these days, if they want to email me, they can email me at tim@trustyourtalent.ca.